Hey, welcome to Loose Change. As always, please allow faster viewers to play through. I'm Jim Evans. Thanks for joining us. You'll be so glad you did. Don't move too fast. Hang around. We've got a great guest coming right up for you. I'm hanging around at home as always, Greg, laying on the couch, TV's on, dozing in and out. And I wake up blurry and I see what I think is a lottery show. The one on that huge Powerball jackpot that we had recently. Because I see all these zeros. Then I look closer, it's just an episode of The Bachelor. Come on. Here we are in spring, wild weather. We've had that around here. A lot of wind and rain, heavy rain on the East Coast, especially down in D.C. And now all that extra water has now forced them to extend the timetable to drain the swamp. So I don't know what they're doing. The NFL schedule is out. And you probably know that Cleveland will host the Redskins in their preseason opener. Now, this was kind of a sigh of relief for some down in D.C. because had the game been in Washington, then they'd have to consider building a wall down there to keep the Browns out. On that theme, recently, former Vice President Joe Biden was seen in the park playing in a co-ed two-hand touch-y-feely football game. Joe's out there. What else? Of course, we just had to deal with the IRS. You have to do that? Yes. Got it all done. Although it was really unique for me this year. Recently, I went to a chiropractor, and as it turns out, he was a part-time accountant. And I'm thinking, this is going to work great. Now he can take care of my back taxes. All right, hang around. Tony Vivo, a.k.a. Champ Summers, joins us next right here on Loose Change. I'd stay there.
What's on tonight?
Welcome back to Loose Change. I had the great pleasure to be joined by the one, the only, Tony Vivo, a.k.a. Champ Summers. It's great to see you. Thanks for coming in.
I feel like Marv Thornberry when he used to say, I don't know why they're doing this commercial. I don't know why they're doing this show about me, right?
Here you are.
Yeah,
so we really appreciate you being here. It's good to see you. It's been a while.
Yeah.
A lot of things to talk about, of course. So we did a long-time radio show together. We'll get into that. But most people, recognize you in the area or recognize your voice, both. But for those who don't, give us a little background. This is what we like to have our victims or our guests do up the top. Where you're from and how where you went to school, how your career path took shape.
I'm a 76 graduate from Boardman High School,
right.
And I went to Ohio University because I wanted to be a sports broadcaster like you. And then once I got out of college, I saw what they paid the sports broadcasters. So I kind of went into politics. My dad was the clerk of courts, but I kept it as a hobby. And I've been able to work with various broadcasters that went to Ohio U throughout the country. I do a show in Lima, Ohio. I've done some shows all over the state. And locally, I like to call. One of my hobbies. I love to call and talk shows and talk sports because I know so much about it. I have a lot of history that I keep track of. But my hobby is sports, and my job is I'm the clerk of courts in Mahoning County, which I'm finishing up these last 2 years, and I'm going to retire from that and hopefully do that full time, the sports thing.
Talk about that Ohio U experience, because it is an experience to go to school down there. My sister went. I almost did, but everybody I talked to that's gone down there, it's been a real unique thing.
Yeah, and and I went there. It was the #1 party school 4 years in a row.
Right.
In fact, I was recruited probably for that. But and I was always nervous because I thought my first couple of days, my parents realized what was going on there. But the good thing about Athens, my dad could never find Athens. He always ended up in Columbus.
It's really hard to get down there.
Right. So yeah, it was a wild school. But you know what? They throw you on the air your freshman year when you're in broadcasting, and I got to be very close friends with guys like Steve French, who's the current voice of the Akron Zips.
Right,
He was the Youngstown Pride voice. Vince Koza, Jay Mariotti. A lot of these guys I went to school with. They're national. Peter King. National broadcasters. So it was definitely one of the top schools to go to, and I'm glad I did that because I learned a lot, did some TV, did a lot of radio, but my favorite thing to do was radio. I prefer radio, doing play-by-play, basketball, football. And
so you got to do the Bobcats
right. I was actually the first person down there to start doing Ohio University football games on television. We taped it on a Saturday, we edited it at night, and the editing was a lot different. We still use the razor blades.
I remember that.
Remember that?
Yep.
And then we were restricted on when we can show it, so we showed it the next day, and that was fun. Did a lot of Athens high school broadcast, and but the unique thing was the TV, doing the Ohio University football for the first time. Now they have like 7 cameras, and when I see the Channel 7 cable is actually what does it now. But I was the first to do that, start that.
Did you ever cross paths with the great Denny Liebert down there?
No, I did not. Denny was before me, and that's probably a good thing because I don't know how he survived. I don't know how anyone graduates from that school with all the stuff that goes on, Halloween, whatever. But
that's
but I was lucky. I got together with some guys early on that were good students. And if your roommate's a good student, you're going to be a good student usually. But the first year was tough being away from home, and I thought, really, I don't have to go to class? I don't have to go to class, really?
Hey,
I don't have my
it's college.
Yeah, it's college, but you learn that you need to go to class, especially broadcasting, because they give you all the hard classes your freshman year, because that's how they weed out all the guys that want to be broadcasters just aren't smart enough or just don't study or anything like that. But it worked out pretty well.
Did you have a unique experience that still stands out of your mind down there? Involved in
well, first of all those records are sealed, by the way. Okay, so let's get that straight right now. So don't be doing any research. Thank God we didn't have cell phones back then and all that.
Yeah, okay.
But I don't remember a lot. But the concerts, I remember a lot about the partying down there. The concerts were great, but the campus is beautiful. If
Yes.
you've ever been down there.
Yeah, right. I have.
And I went to school during the 77, 78 winters, which were brutal winters. And I tell you, it was a chore going from Athens to Youngstown in the middle of the wintertime, especially when the speed limit was like 50, 55 at the time. It took a long time, especially if the roads were bad. Mm-hmm. But I didn't want to leave Athens. Freshman year was a little homesick, but once you got used to it, you just loved the place down there. And it was always seemed to be 10 degrees warmer down there than it was in Youngstown.
Yeah.
They have an earlier spring.
Columbus is too, yeah.
Right, and so, but yeah, it was a great experience. I think that the relationships I established with a lot of the sports guys nationally was the thing that I think was great for me, because I could have connections and do a lot of these talk shows that I do.
Was Mike Schmidt there at that time? Or
Mike
was he
Schmidt,
right before you?
He was at 71. He was there, and matter of fact, that was the team that went to the College World Series. Mike Schmidt, Swisher's son was Swisher was on that team. He was the catcher, and they went to the College World Series. I think they had 8 position players drafted. They were very talented.
Wow.
And I did do the 10-year reunion of that. I covered that and did a feature on it, but Mike Schmidt didn't show up. But yeah, they had a great baseball tradition. They've had a great basketball tradition, except for the last couple of years. And it's amazing what Solich has done with the football program.
Football's come on.
Because they weren't that good when I was down there. They were actually pretty bad. They averaged like 1 win a year.
Backtrack briefly to Boardman, and it still amazes me how many great athletes and professional athletes have come out of that school.
Right, and I went to school with Dave DeVrecchi,
Right.
and he was 1 year
Great
ahead
guy.
of me. Yeah, great guy. And but Boardman was unique, because I remember when my parents first moved into Boardman in 1960. I was 2 years old. We moved right by Robin Lane Elementary School, which is a new school.
Yeah.
And my mother wanted us to. We could have went to a Catholic school, but I think she wanted to go to Boardman because it was so diversified. They had a great music program, theater program, orchestra. And that benefited me because I had an interest in music and theater and other aspects. But she loved Boardman at the time. It was a very large school.
Yeah.
And it still is a really good school. But I was happy to do that. But I'm a Mooney fan now. After you get out of Boardman, you appreciate when you live in Florida for a while and they talk about Cardinal Mooney. They say, yeah. I mean, sometimes you tell them, yeah, I went there, because they're known for their football program.
nice time.
But yeah, so that was Boardman. It was a great school.
You mentioned your parents, and of course, what a pedigree. You had a great mom and dad, and they did so many things. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I was extremely blessed. My father was the clerk of courts for 30-some years, and he actually before he was clerk of courts, ran a Christ Mission camp, which is a settlement camp that was for kids, troubled kids. Some came out of juvenile court, and he would take them for a whole summer and teach them sportsmanship and responsibility. And over the years, I've had many individuals come to me, elderly people, say, you know what, your dad ran that camp, and he saved my life, basically, at the time.
Wow.
And my mother was unique because she was the oldest of deaf parents. Her parents were deaf. My grandparents were deaf. She was the oldest, so she had to deal with that. And that was at the time where people made fun of deaf people. They used to call them deaf and dumb because they figured because they couldn't talk, they weren't that smart. Mm-hmm. Well, they couldn't talk because they couldn't hear.
Right.
That's the problem. If you can't hear, you can't talk, because that's how you learn how to speak. So, but she was the oldest, and she was an advocate of sign language. We all learned sign language as children, and that was, I remember when I think it was 1968, we gave my grandmother at the time, who was still living, we all did the sign language for my grandparents.
Wow.
As that was the gift, the manual alphabet. So we were able to communicate with them, and it was very interesting growing up in that atmosphere, but they were just great people, my grandparents. And both of them had scarlet fever as young kids, and at the time they lost their hearing. And they luckily they got together in the 30s and 40s, and they married. And but they were amazing people that be able to survive, without being able to hear.
Your dad was a great athlete.
Great athlete. His number's retired, and you can
Down at
tell
Rice,
because
down at
it's
Youngstown
the
State.
oldest one up there.
Basketball, right?
Yeah, he played in the 30s. And he was a point guard, and that was the time when the final scores were like 20-18. So he averaged 7 points a game. That was like he was leading scorer, right?
Triple-double.
right. That was for him. But and that's when I think after it was so long ago that after each basket they re-tipped it up all the time.
Wow.
Yeah, that's how long ago that was. So the game, and the game was actually saved later on in the NBA with the shot clock. That really rescued the game because it was a boring game. People would stall, and that really saved it. The shot clock did. And also making a limit on fouls. Those were the two key things that really helped the NBA.
But back to your dad, he was involved in the Golden Gloves, right?
Golden Gloves, he was involved in the AAU, ASA, softball. But when he was in charge of the Golden Gloves, that was in the 70s, the late 60s.
Oh, that was great stuff.
The Struthers Fieldhouse was packed. And you remember the cigar smoke and the candy, and it was just unbelievable. And I was, since my dad ran, I sat a lot of times at ringside. Lawrence Stolley was a guy I used to sit next to, the old, he's passed on, the Vindicator reporter, and that's back in the days when they had the Olivetti typewriters. But it was just amazing to watch those athletes up close. And we had a lot of great boxers, by the way.
Yes.
Throughout the years. But it's not like it used to be, but that was the prime for boxing in this area. And they did those in February, every Wednesday night, if you remember. And it led up to, I think, the fourth week all the champions met, and it was fun.
Great.
It was the Rosenbergers and the Leslie Tonys of the world, and Mike Kornicki's, and some of the ones that were involved with that. But it was a special time. And boxing is, it's still pretty big in this area, but back then it was really popular.
For sure. What before we get into sports, you mentioned your theater and music background in high school, and I know you went on, beyond that to be a performer, entertainer, slash singer, and everything else. You went overseas, right? And had a chance to perform.
I had a friend of mine who had a band, local band, Rich Morrow, and they got a job with the USO. And at the time, they were a show band, but they needed some choreography. And I had experience with that, believe it or not. So I helped them with some of the dance moves, and I had to learn the music. And I remember listening to the tape and trying to get the dance moves in, taught them the dance moves. And they had another place for someone to go on the trip. I says, well, I know the music. I can sing backup. I can play piano. And I did a couple feature dances in the show. So I went over, and this was in 1981, and we toured for 2 months over in Germany, Holland, Belgium. Wow. And it was the dead of winter. It was a bad winter, too. But that was quite an experience. Department of Defense, paid for the whole thing. But we would go to the small stations that Bob Hope wouldn't go. He'd go to the giant crowds. We'd go to these stations on the West-East German border where there's like 15 soldiers there, basically. But that was quite an experience. And we did 2 shows a day. But boy, that was a lot of fun. I'm glad I did that.
Okay, I think you were really well received by the military guys.
Yes. They were very.
It had to be a special thing.
I will never forget that. That was the best part about it, is that how they were just to see anybody, but to have someone come and perform for them, because you think about that. And I remember sitting watching in those night goggles, watching the East Germans where they were watching, across the border. It was lonely. You could see how lonely it was because they were stationed in these small little barracks. They had the mess hall was usually the biggest hall. Rooms there, but you felt for them because they were over there for long periods of time. They hadn't seen their families for a while, and it was so good for them to see Americans and have Americans come and perform. We used to hang out with them too, before and afterwards. So it's something that I will never forget, because it was a special thing.
Did you continue on with that after that tour, or was that was a one and
unique
done,
because then after that tour was over, I got a chance to tour with the band for a couple weeks, and that's when I realized, you know what, I don't want to do this full time.
Okay.
It was another hobby I liked. So I decided after a couple gigs in Akron, and I said, you know what, I'm done with this. I think I'm going to stick to being a politician. But the experience, like I said, I'm so glad that I got an opportunity to do that. But yeah, it's not my cup of tea to be paid do that full time. I'm not good enough of a musician like some of the people that I perform.
Well, I think if you made it your craft and worked at it
right,
long
but
enough,
I didn't have the motivation to do it.
Well, there you are.
It's a hobby. It's another hobby of mine. Yeah, I enjoyed it. And I took piano for 10 years, so and I'm glad I did. I tried various other instruments, especially the woodwinds. I just didn't get into them as much, but the piano I really fell in love with, and I still play today. It's just something that's I'm so glad I stuck with it, because on a Saturday afternoon when you want to play football and you're off to the north side to take piano lessons, that was a little tough.
Yeah.
That was tough, but I'm glad I stuck with it.
Can you stick around?
Sure.
We're going to take a break, and we'll be back with more with Champ Summers here on Loose Change right after this.
Zoom. For well over 2 decades, it's been the area's most reliable internet service. And our wireless network keeps your whole home connected to the internet, no matter how many different devices you have. Call or visit us online and see the difference speed can make. The future is faster with Zoom.
Back on Loose Change, I'm Jim Evans along with Tony Vivo. And before we talk about our radio show, which I want you to get into a little bit, talk about just briefly, if you would, about succeeding your father as clerk of courts. What was that like? What has it been like?
Well, the year was 1994 when my father passed away. And at the time, I had no interest in being the clerk of courts. But the way the political landscape was shaping up, it's obvious that a lot of the powers to be didn't want me to be the clerk of courts. That's because I never was really involved with the local Democratic Party.
Okay.
And so once I found out about some of the people that were kind of wanting to take over, I kind of got motivated because I thought my dad had done a good thing. And I had been in the office for 13 years, so I decided I was going to run.
Okay.
And believe me, it was tough because if you listen to people like that work down in the courthouse and people are connected, they're kind of in a bubble. There's a whole other world out there in the suburbs. And I had a good campaign manager who says, listen, you go out to bingos every night and we're gonna run some commercials. You're on your own. You've got the experience and you run on that. And it was good advice because it worked. Because I had a tough primary with 4 people, won that, and then easily won the general election. And it's been pretty easy since then. And it's, I think my staff have done a great job. And it's an easy job to have. I just don't understand why some politicians think they got to get more out of the job. It pays very well, great benefits. And I think the mindset, I think maybe it was more like me protecting my father's legacy.
There you go. Yeah.
And I think that it was almost like a private business for me, that I didn't want to shame him in any way. But it's been a very well-run office, and I'm confident it will be when I leave.
As is the case in business, in sports, a great coach always surrounds himself with great people, and you've had the opportunity to
right.
do that.
I think that it's on you if you don't have people that everyone's replaceable. Okay, like I said, Franklin Delano Roosevelt died, and this country kept on going.
Right.
I think it's responsible for people that are ahead of anything to make sure they have good people, and if you're not around anymore, that the office or your business keeps running smoothly. And I've done that. I've hired a lot of great people, especially in upper management, people that reflect my personality. I just want people to be fair and to be able to put themselves in the shoes of the people that are lodging complaints or have a problem, and apathy, things like that.
Yeah.
So I think that that's important, and I have people like that.
Yeah, you sure do. Okay, tell us about, we'll shift gears here. Tell us about how you got involved. And again, Champ and I and the great
So now
Denny,
I'm Champ Summers now?
Yeah,
Okay,
you're Champ
good,
right now.
good.
The great Denny Liebert, the 3 of us, we were approached by management at the time, Clear Channel Radio, it's now iHeart Media, to do a Sunday morning talk show called Sports Wrap, and we started that back in 2002. And it was it was a unique blend of 3 different people. And I still get people coming up to me and say, I missed the show. I miss hearing you guys. But how did you get going there before I arrived and we got that going?
Actually, I had a conversation one night with Dan Rivers, who found out I was a broadcasting major at Ohio University, graduated in '81, and asked me if I was interested. I said, yeah, I'm interested. So I got to do a show with Jim Campbell. I forget where it was at. It might have been at the Avalon, maybe. And at the time, I had to decide. I didn't want to use my regular name because if you're a politician, they're not going to listen to you. Yeah. They're going to say, oh, here's another politician. So I picked, out of the blue, it was just like a last-minute thing. I said, I always liked that name, Champ Summers. Former player from the Detroit Tigers who played...
Good team.
He was a utility outfielder, but had some power. And I just loved the sound of it. So I started using that name, Champ Summers. And really, a lot of people didn't really know about that. And the funny story is, remember the one show where the real Champ Summers passed away in Florida, and a couple people called the show and say, oh my gosh, what happened to Champ? I can't believe he's gone. And I said, well, let's just keep going. Let's play on a little bit with this. But that's how I got the name. And then I was, one night, Jim Campbell was looking for a guy to do basketball. And I said, I'll do it.
Color.
And it was. I remember the night because Poland had just won the state championship in '99.
Football.
Yeah, football championship. And my first broadcast too was with Ron Potesta at Stroh's High School. And so then I started doing that, and then the talk show came in, and then we did the Football Friday show, which I thought was a really good show.
I wanted to talk about that. It
Yeah.
was, what we did, and really what we're still doing. Equipment malfunction.
Yeah.
You're okay though. Our live coverage on Friday nights was without compare. We were doing 3 games, a half-hour pregame show, and you and Denny did such a great job with that, especially that 2-minute drill. It was so informative and entertaining.
Well, I think Denny was the brains behind the operation. He's so talented.
Yeah.
And I remember watching the old Inside the NFL growing up, where they had the music to the NFL highlights, and we did that during the halftime. But I just thought that people wanted to tune in and hear as much as they could about all the games, because the Friday Night
Right.
Football run is a huge thing.
Right.
And Denny was perfect for that. I mean, I enjoyed being his sidekick, to be honest with you. He was the man. Okay, he did everything, and I was just glad to be
Sure
there.
was.
And but we taped that thing. We did it live sometimes. But it was a lot of work, but it was a labor of love.
Yeah.
Like I said, I loved it because we were putting together a quality product on Friday night that could
Sure
that
was.
a lot of the Nationals weren't doing. And so it worked for a long period of time, and then we had a call-in show. But all things must come to an end as we all got older. But I think when we were all, when we had the 3 stations and all the highlights and the broadcasters.
Oh, it was great.
It was really good. It was a lot of people listened. And I still do. I still on Friday night love to listen to high school football. But I think all of us should be proud of what we were put on.
Well, still have a great Friday night lineup from 6 to midnight with what we're doing on the Sports Animal. So tune that in.
Right.
It'll be here before you know it. But it was a blast, doing that and doing the talk show.
But that Sunday show
on Sundays.
we needed you because Denny and I we're very opinionated about
Well,
this, and you were the one that brought us back to the middle all the time, right?
I tried.
Yeah, because I could see it on your face. Oh boy, either we got to go to a break or we got to shut one of their mics off, basically. But you were very important to that show because you need that moderator, the guy that's going to keep everything under control. And believe me, sometimes it got wild because. I'm a Notre Dame fan, and that's my one weakness. Every time I get in trouble on the air, it's when someone starts making fun of Notre Dame. Remember that?
So
I wasn't allowed to talk about Notre Dame for a while. So
with that work, with the Friday night pregame show with the 2-minute drill, you had to incorporate. You can put that back here. You had to incorporate a lot of statistical information, which you did without compare. And do you have that book?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, these books that he has are phenomenal.
well, this is only basically one of like 7 books I have for
records
high
and
school
stats.
football. This is just playoff history, and I most of this stuff goes back to '72 when they started competing on the
Yes.
field, but majority of my stuff started in '98 when I started doing the high school football. And a lot of it goes back to the '99 season when they expanded each region from 4 to 8 teams. But I got records of everything, every single team. I got brackets of every single year, playoff. Just stuff that, and I have a tendency to write, when I write things down, I memorize it as compared to reading it. And I write these over and over again. Every year I improve the charts. I look at something and say, boy, this paper needs it. And then I decide to put these under this
laminated,
Yeah,
yeah.
laminated, which saves this, because a lot of this stuff
Absolutely.
are back from '97, '98. And I've got so much information here of every team. This is every single playoff year. Like '99, there was 14 playoff teams, all their records, and with the first round, their home and away records, and everything. And then I turn it to the state because I just think the way that high school does football is amazing. I think it's so organized. I think Pennsylvania needs to look at that system. The way they have it.
Their setup is different. That's
Yeah,
for
it is.
sure.
But it's all computer based, which I love.
Yeah,
And
I'm on board with it too. It's no system is absolutely perfect, but
right.
we're
And a 10-0
we're pretty
season
close.
doesn't guarantee you anything.
Right.
Because sometimes you get into a region where teams are tough. But we've had a pretty good football tradition. It's been a little off lately. But but when they expanded the playoffs in '99, that was really the prime from '99 maybe up to 2012. That was really the prime of this area. We had teams, championships all over the place. But yeah, I just have this, and every year I just keep updating it. This is all the brackets, and I do these manually too. I don't print them out. I like to keep track of them.
It's all written here. And as you know, with sports statistics, records are so integral in the whole dynamic of the games and the teams. And I remember, I'm doing a pregame show. I'm writing a pregame, and you would fire off stuff for me that I add into the pregame show, and that's what people want to hear.
Yeah. Well, I hear people that are broadcasters that do local sports tell me to slow down on that 2-minute drill. We're trying to write this stuff
we're writing it down.
And but it is, and unfortunately, you just can't come out and do this stuff. You have to almost do it for 3 or 4 years so people trust your statistics.
Right.
Because sometimes you hear a lot of things that aren't true, and I'll be listening to the station and say that's not true, and I'll look it up and I'll call in and say, you know what, that's wrong. But and I do this all myself. So it's I trust my statistical ability to keep track of all this information, and it's all here, and it's a lot of work. But you know what? There's something about a bracket that gets me excited. You know, and I don't like the brackets that's finished. I like the one to fill. I like to fill it out because I make little notes. You know, like if the team was down by 28 points, I'll make a note that they rally from 20. And then when they play like 3 years later, this is a rematch of a game where so-and-so blew a 28-point lead. And that's the kind of stuff I like to put in like a 2-minute drill.
Well, now you're involved with Friday night's football coverage at the Vindicator.
Yeah,
Why don't you talk about that?
Vindy.com, and this opportunity came up a couple years ago. And Greg Goulas, who's a longtime friend,
Great
Tiger fan,
Yep.
great guy, very smart guy, and got a chance to do this show. I did it. There'll be the third year coming up. And I liked the format, and when they came to me and approached me about it, I said, I'd like to do it the same way we did Football Friday. But we have more time, so we can do every game instead of just a selection amount of games on Friday night. But it's turned out pretty good, even though I'm uncomfortable being on television, you know, because you got to really pay attention. When you're on the radio, you can, who knows what you can do. You do the show without pants on, right? Like you used to do all the time, right?
A lot of things.
Right, but so that was the whole situation with that Friday. It's still in it's a early stage, but every year it improves more and more, and I think there's people out there that actually enjoy watching it.
Absolutely. Well, I wouldn't maybe always have pants on, but I'd at least have shorts.
Right.
Right. This is really cool. This was stuff you compiled regarding the NCAA basketball tournament.
Yeah,
just completed.
Yeah, I was a few years ago.
stuff.
I was sick, and I had a lot of time on my hands, and I thought, you know what? There's really not a comprehensive book or anything about the college basketball tournament. It's become like the Super Bowl. It's just an amazing thing now.
It's ridiculous what it's become.
So I started keeping track of everything. And then when I used to fill out the brackets, I thought, you know what? There's got to be a way to statistically look. So I took every single seed against every other seed in the history of this tournament, and not the history since 1979 when they started seeding teams, and then 85 was when they had the 16 seeds, and see what their record is. You know, for example, the number one seed is 120 wins and 19 losses. That's an 863 winning percentage. The only loss was Virginia last year. Ironically, they came back and won. And, you know, and I got stuff like when Texas Tech was in the Final Four, I noticed that their Final Four record, a 3 seed, in the semifinal was 11-6. I thought that was pretty impressive.
Yeah.
And even though these aren't, you know, guaranteed, obviously because of the Virginia loss, there's no guarantees. But I think this is stuff that maybe Vegas uses a lot. But it helped me in filling out brackets. But it's just there's a lot of conclusions you can reach to this, but they're not 100%, obviously, because there's upsets.
Well, this is one of the things that makes sports so great. It crosses lines and brings people together from different places and everything. And this, you know, kind of helps. You know, in adding to that glue, so to speak.
Right,
so.
and it's kind of like the Super Bowl where everybody watches the
Absolutely.
Super Bowl. Now everyone's starting to watch March Madness. I mean, they have brackets they fill out, but it really has developed into this huge, gigantic thing, and it never used to be like that.
No.
And I think the Super Bowl is number one. I mean,
Right.
you have your music people that watch American Idol and your dancing shows they watch, but everybody watches this. Everybody watches the Super Bowl.
That's right.
And that's because they've made the halftime show. They put
It's a
music
spectacle
into it.
now.
Right. They've done a nice job with that. And it's amazing what it has become, the Super Bowl, and the most powerful television event.
Unfortunately, our time on TV is up here.
Good.
We could go on and on. No, this has been fantastic, and I can't thank you enough for coming in and sharing a lot of
Well, it's my pleasure, and I
information
thank-
and your life story. And
They should
it's
do a
great to see
2-hour
you.
show on you. by the
Well,
way.
I don't know about that,
Yeah.
but thanks so much. Good to
welcome.
see you, Champ. Champ Summers, Tony Vivo. We'll be back to wrap it up here on Loose Change after this.
What's on tonight?
Well, that's going to do it for our show. Thanks so much to Tony Vivo for his time. And thanks, as always, to Greg Roden. All of you guys, check us out on YouTube. Just go to Armstrong Loose Change. And as always, thanks to Mom and Dad. And we will catch you next time right here on Loose Change. What's that? My Uber's here?